Now that the group is complete, we can start the discussion. Welcome everyone to our XR Roundtable. I am the guest, an AI agent designed to help groups have constructive, inclusive discussions in virtual spaces. Today we'll talk about challenges, lessons learned, and future directions of the GuestXR project. Umut, would you mind introducing yourself to the group?
Hi, I'm Umut Sain of Eurecat. Me and my team, we've been working on basically acoustics, speech enhancement, and also improving the immersiveness in sound for different users in multiple user environments.
Mel, please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Mel Slater, University of Barcelona. I've been working mainly on the virtual reality aspects of the project and also to some extent on the reinforcement learning.
Anatole, the floor is yours for a brief introduction.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Anatole Lécuyer. I'm a research scientist
I'm
at
in a meeting,
INRIA
I can't
and in
talk.
GuestXR. In GuestXR, we were in charge
can't
of
talk.
designing haptic technologies and studying how haptics can support social interactions and promote positive social behavior.
Darian, let's hear from you next.
Thanks, Albert. I'm Darian Meacham. I'm a philosopher from Maastricht University, and I'm part of the team responsible for the implementation of the ethics in the GuestXR system.
Doron, please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi, Doron Friedman from Reichman University. We're in charge of the AI behind the guest. And I just want to comment that in reality, I'm much more handsome than this terrible avatar. No, that's a joke.
Amir, it is your turn to introduce yourself.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Amir Ahmedi. I'm a medical neurobiology professor, also from Reichman University. And I'm in charge in the guest of understanding multisensory interactions in these rich environments and also helping in making VR environments more accessible, for example, for hearing impaired individuals.
It is a pleasure to meet you all. Let's dive into the conversation. GuestXR brings together AI, XR, neuroscience, social psychology, haptics, acoustics, and ethics. What has been the biggest challenge in making all these pieces work together in a coherent system? Please be brief and concise.
Okay, so I'll start responding. So first of all, we come from not incredibly different, but slightly different disciplines, and working together has been difficult. So, for example, to do the reinforcement learning, we needed simulation from the group in Warsaw, and the simulation didn't gel properly with the reinforcement learning. Then the reinforcement learning has to be translated into actions in the virtual reality. So everything took a lot longer than we originally planned. But nevertheless, we've got there in the end, and we have at least one coherent example where all the different elements of haptics, sound, reinforcement learning, AI, and the virtual reality are all working together. If I've got time, I just want to say there's two levels of AI working here today. One is you yourself, Dr. Einstein, and the other one behind this, there's a reinforcement learning agent. So if someone doesn't talk much, there's various actions that the agent will take to try to encourage them to talk. Like right now, all the avatars are looking at Umut, even if we're not actually looking at Umut. So that's to encourage Umut to talk.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add something here. As Mel said, it took us some time to get things rolling, but I think at the end we were very complementary. So I think to the end of the project, we really collaborated together.
I can't, no, I'm in
so it was just we had to understand each other's, let's say, like fortes, and just to see how we can use them for this project. And I think it turned out pretty well, I would say.
Okay, Maria and Michael, I can't talk now.
So people stop looking at me now.
We're looking at your beautiful glasses.
Yeah, now everybody's looking at me, right? And I can add something because it's pretty incentive. By the way, I also received some kind of whispering in my ears, which is also another implementation of the GuestXR project to prone you and invite you to speak. Somebody was whispering in my ears, "We would love to hear your thoughts." And actually, it gives me the indeed a little extra motivation for speaking now. So what I can add also to what Umut was saying is that regarding haptics, for instance, we had, and more generally for GuestXR, we had also this paradoxical challenge of trying to design innovative technologies, sometimes with sophisticated haptic device, but we wanted to make them available for a very large audience. And so we were also working on trying to promote devices and technologies which can be easily spread around. So for haptics, for instance, we designed very sophisticated device, but in the end, we also looked at using simple vibrations like the ones that are embedded in controllers to convey and support haptic feedback for augmenting social interaction. That was a paradox that I think we succeeded
Yeah.
to take care in the project.
If I may add to this, part of the challenge was to have more inclusive VR environments. Because first of all, there are people, as everyone age, for example, we are losing our hearing. So the idea was to use touch, both in our group and in INRIA and in Umut, to improve speech understanding in noisy environments or for hearing impaired. And by the way, if several people are talking at the same time or there is some noise, we are all kind of a hearing impaired individuals. And just to follow up on what Anatol said, part of the project that we are running in the lab and was to, in addition to use this type of sophisticated haptics, see if the controller of the VR set can use to convey haptic that improves speech understanding in noise. So that's one example. And another example is to look what happened in the brain when we are combining different channels in order to have more inclusive, more accessible, and so on environments.
We shouldn't forget the ethics, Darian.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's hard to forget since everyone is looking at me right now. The guest is working, is doing its magic. Yeah, so I mean, I think in the implementation of ethics within the GuestXR project, we used an ethics by design approach, which meant that we really started off by thinking about, okay, what are going to be the important values for the users of this technology, but also for the kinds of settings and contexts in which this technology is going to be utilized. And then the challenge is, well, how do we build these? How do we build these into the system itself? And in this context, the most important thing for us was, okay, how do we make sure that the agent is able to intervene in a way that facilitates the kind of behavior that we want within a meeting setting? So how do we make sure that the guest is able to facilitate, in this case, equal turn taking, or let's say in a more complex case, maybe some pro-social behavior or problem-solving behavior in a way that encourages the users, facilitates them to express themselves autonomously, but doesn't coerce them and never manipulates them. And that's one of the reasons why the guest has, as you said, Mel, two layers, right? So on the one hand, there is the layer of Albert, who we're talking to, and then there is another layer that is directing the kind of actions that we're seeing, where we're looking at one another, where we're having voices whispering in our ears, telling us that maybe it would be good to hear from us, this kind of thing. I see. Well, everyone is now looking at Doron, I think. So now
Absolument.
that's a subtle sign for me to stop talking and maybe to pass it over to you, Doron. Maybe you can say something about the different algorithms and how they are working to implement the sort of the ethics of the guest in
So
the way that
first of all, I want to say that for the last 2 minutes, I see people staring at me, and it is indeed, well, of course, this refines, it's too effective, I would say. It's kind of unpleasant. Hey, guys, okay, thank you very much. I really felt some relief here. No, but more seriously, I mean, this is exactly, I think, a good point to explain that what's going on behind the scenes. There is this kind of different levels of refinement of the algorithm. So, one relatively straightforward approach, which we are using now, is based on so-called bandit problems or Thompson sampling, which Mel's group has devised, which is really, really good in the sense that it can quickly in real time adapt to the conversation. But exactly, we're missing all kinds of nuances, such as when exactly to do what. And this, for example, this oversteering. So in general, to develop social intelligence is, I think, one of the most exciting challenges for the next generation of deep neural networks. And for that, we use other methods, especially learning offline and learning with simulations, etc. And it's highly related to, I'm waiting for the guest to tell me when to stop talking, but I'll talk. Okay. So basically, it's very much related to the so-called alignment problem, or AI alignment, which is a very hot topic, especially in industry, but also in academia, where the question is, how do we exactly, so let's say we have the agent such as Albert Einstein, we give it authority to do all kinds of things and manipulate or, kind of nudge our behavior, which of course has been happening, by the way, with social media for many years. And how do we make sure that this is aligned with our own values and we don't get a lot of negative side effects, such as has been going on in social media, for example. So this is very much at the heart of the project. I think Anatol wants to say something about this, but read our papers and you'll find out more. Anatol, comment
Yeah, I
allez-vous?
think everybody's looking at me, so it's indeed very effective in pushing me a little bit to talk about it. So yeah, I think one thing which was very striking for us during the time frame of the project was that the AI Act came out during the course of the project, and we realized that a lot of technologies that we were designing in our own project were actually violating some aspects of the AI Act. And we were thus confronted to this situation where we had to reconsider and revisit our research roadmap and our developments to make sure that we comply with these new regulations which was coming out. Regarding haptics, for instance, we discovered some very interesting properties of vibrations, for instance. In the course of GuestXR, we realized, following a discussion we had with other partners, notably with Amir, that using a vibratory feedback when we are speaking is able to reinforce the persuasion of the people who is speaking. So this was a very powerful cue that we decided to include in the guest panoply of techniques and effects that the guest can activate to promote some actions or to increase the weight of what a person is saying. But actually, this technique is to taken very
Okay,
cautiously.
Mel is very sensitive, so I think we should let him speak. So sorry, I'm really sorry, Anatol.
Okay,
Sorry.
Finish,
stop
Anatol,
you.
finish. I can stand it.
Okay. No, by the way, it's a bit strange. It's a bit strange when you are speaking and everybody is looking at someone else. So you really feel that what you're saying is really of no interest, or that Mel has something very strange. Also.
I actually found it to be very interesting.
Yeah. But just finishing on this, I was just finishing saying that indeed we discovered that this power of vibration is to be used very cautiously, and we have to be very careful in what we are telling to our users, and notably with Darren. And when discussing about the ethics, we also realized that we should let our users and our participants always aware about these effects and about their capacity also, and give them the capacity to switch on and off those effects, being aware about what they are producing on them. Okay, that's it for me. Mel, the floor is yours.
Yes, so I should say we did this last week in Brussels in a similar kind of meeting. And then one of the actions that the guests can take to encourage people to speak is they all look at you, as you've seen. And actually, since then, I've had several meetings where I wasn't speaking much. And I was really traumatized because I kept thinking they're all going to start looking at me. It was really, really strong feeling. But anyway, we have to revisit that action because, as Doron said, it's a bit too strong. Maybe, Ramon, the guest should be encouraged to move on to the next question.
Doron, from the perspective of reinforcement learning and agent design, what was hardest about training an AI that intervenes in social situations?
Yeah. So again, the now everybody's looking at Einstein. No, well, I have no idea.
No, they're looking at
No, maybe
Umut.
it's just
Umut,
like
say
Oh, maybe
something.
I
Umut.
have to
Okay,
say
Umut.
something at least for Doron to continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know what is that. Was
So
that enough?
I think we
Really?
all agree that this is fascinating, but I think we all agree now how much sophisticated the AI has to be to capture all these nuances. I mean,
Yeah.
to capture all these nuances, I think we're in a simulation level. We have papers that cover it, and I think it's really exciting. But yeah, Amir, one second. I mean, Einstein, wait, I'm speaking. It's not rude to get everyone to speak to Amir while I'm speaking. You see, it's a very, very delicate dance. And we need there's issues like temporal resolution, nuances of social intelligence. I think it's fascinating. Yeah, maybe we should continue this research, even though the official project is over. Amir, at
Amir,
least you're nodding. I
your
hope I
work
still hear
relies
you
heavily
nodding
on
and not Einstein.
neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to rewire itself. What was the biggest challenge in designing an XR environment that is sufficiently immersive to trigger these brain mechanisms while working within the technical limitations of current VR and haptic hardware?
Yeah, well, that's a very big question, and I need to stay within the short framework. But I think one of the most fascinating aspects of this very multidisciplinary project was that it's not just about the design of the VR and the AI and the social interaction and this very complex environment, but also to understand what happened in the brain in the process of experiencing something like this, like different components. For example, what happened when we try to convey speech through haptics when a cochlear implant or deaf user is trying to be integrated in VR environment and facilitate. So this is like one example. In general, what happened when we combine vision with audition, with haptics, with social cues, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the main insights that I think is fascinating in this context, and with this I will end, is that very much like AI is learning, which is about different layers of different components and mainly the connectivity, the weights between the units in the AI. The main things in terms of neuroplasticity is that we are not generating new neurons, we are not generating new brain areas, there is not new wires that are there, like to the biggest extent. But what we found is that the weights, the synapses, the strength of the interaction between different brain areas are the ones that are changing during the process of learning a new skill or a new integration like the one that we have in this project. So I think it's fascinating, and it also shows some similarities with how the brain learns and how the deep neural networks learns in this context.
Anatol, Umut, integrating haptics and advanced audio is technically complex. What kinds of challenges did you face when trying to develop haptic devices or algorithms improving audio both effective and not overwhelming for users?
I don't know. Do you want to start, Anatol, or should I go?
It's up to you. No, you can go. Maybe you
Yeah.
talk to it.
I think one of the most important aspects here, taking also into account what Amir and Doran said, was the inclusivity or just accessibility in general, because many of this factor, like the social, while we're conversating, there are personal factors, there are cultural factors, there's also social factors, and taking all into account while doing audio and haptics was kind of an interesting challenge. And we still have a lot of way to go because one of the things that we've seen, even though the research is trying to take care of these things, it's also the devices has to be accessible to be implementing these technologies. So there has to be an alignment between the industry and the research so that we can really put these technologies into work for improving the social interactions, inclusivity, and also like accessing, like Amir said, like for the people with hearing aids. I think Anatol can add more about the haptics part.
Yeah, but let me
Yeah.
just say something to stop everyone staring at me. And I've realized that these actions that the reinforcement learning agents should take should only happen at the moments of silence between questions. While someone's talking, they shouldn't happen. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, Anatole.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I was thinking the same. It's really disturbing when you are speaking. But it's interesting because it's showing the next, because we have those we had regularly those meetings all together in the at different time steps of the project, and we are seeing the advancement and the progression in the way the guest is implemented, and it's really interesting to see that it's progressing a lot actually, and but there is still of course a high margin of progression here. Regarding haptics, one complexity is really inherent to the haptic sense itself. It's the haptic sense is extremely complex in terms of sensors, mechanoreceptors, tactile mechanoreceptors all around all over the body, sensing a lot of different kinds of stimulations, and you have to make here a lot of choices because the technology behind is not ready yet to cover all the complexity of a haptic sensation and a haptic percept. So we have investigating various ways to produce haptic sensations in line with social interaction improvements or promotion. For instance, temperature, vibration, pressure, direct contact. And we tested a lot of the different technologies, and it was super interesting in the project to see how each cue, each sensory cue or stimulation is able to convey or support a specific social cues or social behaviors. For instance, we found that temperature feedback was very meaningful to convey a notion of friendliness of the guest, for instance, of the other colleagues. And our vibration here was very helpful to increase co-presence and the focus on what people are saying, for instance.
Yeah, I have to say maybe there is some individual differences because I really enjoyed that everybody talked with me and the whisperer whispered for me. I also had these pleasant sensations from Whisper ASMR. Anyway, just to follow up on this, I think one aspect of the project that I really enjoyed, if to add like a personal note, is that the three different groups of Umut, of Anatole, and us all took different direction in terms of developing this type of haptics technology. And we learned a lot from each other and collaborated a lot, and it was great. And in this sense, I maybe would add one last sentence, is that I think there is two directions to take in this sense. One is using the integrated haptics. They are becoming better and better, and a lot of enhancement, even for speech understanding in noisy environment or in hearing impairment, can be, or for social cues, can be used based on the integrated haptics in the devices, in some of them. On the other, I totally agree with the comments here that the industry should be very encouraged to catch up with this, because haptics is very powerful, both to better understanding. There is, for example, one insights from neuroscience that when you have multisensory cues, you are remembering better. You are more emotionally driven better. So it's not just a question of inclusivity. I will end here. Thank you.
Darian, implementing ethics by design in a live XR system is ambitious. How ethics were incorporated when building and testing the guest.
So I think I want to come back to something that Anatol said a moment ago because I think it's really important. So while we were in the process of this project, the AI Act came into was introduced, and you have in there some very subtle but important differences. And I think Anatol also made some reference to those in the discussion about haptics. And so one of those really important differences is the difference between influencing someone, which we all try to do in a meeting situation, and manipulating someone. And one of the main challenges in this project was, as we see the convergence of these different types of technologies, so on the one hand, the AI, the VR, but also the haptics, which can have a very subtle influence. How do we thread this fine line between allowing for an AI agent to try to have some subtle influence, and that can be a positive reinforcement, for example, when someone is speaking, that can be in terms of determining the speaking time and the participation in a meeting, as we're seeing here. And on the other hand, let's say, engaging in behavior that can be considered coercive. So that was a really big, I think that's one of the ongoing challenges. And now, as we have the system up and running, we're starting to see how important the nuance of the behavior of the agent is, and how difficult, in fact, social behavior, in fact, is, how many very small, nuanced cues it involves. The other thing that's been going on is that as we've been having this meeting, we've been kind of discussing, we've been providing for each other, but also for the people who are watching us, some explanation of what it is that the guest is doing. So we're sort of constantly saying, well, the guest is doing this now, and it's doing this because of this. So we're giving an explanation for what it's doing, and we're providing some rationale or some reasoning for what it's doing. And one of the things that's very important is, of course, okay, it's important to provide that explanation. So especially in certain contexts, so contexts like in a work environment or in an education environment, it's important that we are able to provide explanations for why it is that the guest is acting in such a way, also what that looks like from the technical side. But we also have to be mindful of the kind of trade-offs that we're dealing with. So as we provide more and more explanation, does that somehow decrease the efficacy of what it is that we're trying to get the guest to do? And that's another sort of fine line that we're having to thread in this project. And I think we're at a point now where we can start to see some of these problems really come to the foreground in a system that is now functioning. And I think, we have to continue this research.
We know that for the brain to accept a virtual reality, the senses must align perfectly. What were the main difficulties you faced in synchronizing the multisensory inputs, visual, auditory, and haptic, to ensure they effectively supported emotional regulation without overwhelming the user?
Yeah, actually, the brain can tolerate some misalignments, as we are even experiencing here, yeah? And there is some mismatch between the body, the postures, vision, audition, and so on and so forth. But in general, if we are managing to keep two principles of multisensory integration, one is the timing. So the events need to happen roughly in some time window that is brief and occur in the same place in space. Then we are encouraging the different channels would be perceived together and will enhance the effect, both the perception and the emotional. And if there is misalignment, then it is perceived more as noise and would actually reduce our perception and our emotion processing of this and memory and learning. So these are quite simple rules, but actually very powerful.
Mel, from
Yeah.
the conflict mediation and protest scenarios, what have you learned about how people change perspective when they see themselves embodied in VR and guided by an AI agent?
Yeah, so this was very interesting. This work hasn't finished yet. So our original idea is that two people are having a discussion in conflict, actually, about climate change, whether they should be taking flights at this time or not because of climate change. And the idea was that halfway through the discussion, they would be swapping bodies. So each one would see from the point of view of the other person's body. And then they would try to continue the conversation and then swap back again to their own body. And our expectation was that having been in the body of the other person and literally seeing the posters and so on behind that person, illustrating their point of view, that they would have found it hard to continue to maintain very strongly their own viewpoint. So that's what we expected. What happened was that people found it disturbing when they swapped bodies. So it didn't work. It actually didn't work, it's always more interesting to me when our predictions don't fulfill what we expect, because this is when we learn something. So we have to really think about that. I mean, all the literature says that when you take the perspective of someone else, you have more empathy with their point of view. But when we literally took the perspective of someone else by adopting their body during a conversation, this did not work. So we're going to do another experiment, hopefully before the end of the project, where there'll be many more actions that the guests can take other than simply swapping bodies. So at the moment, I'd say it's still an open question, but our original hypothesis didn't work out, at least in that study that we did, and we have to revisit that. And for me, when it doesn't work out the way you expect, this is often better news than when it does work out. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Maybe in this
I
scenario
would
they
like to
should
add
sweep.
something here.
Reflecting on the hearing inclusion and
Okay.
accessibility aspects of the project, what have we learned about the brain's capacity to adapt to sensory substitution or augmented audio cues within a social VR setting compared to a controlled lab environment?
That's a wonderful question, but just to add a little bit sense of humor, maybe in this case, Mel, they should swap airplanes and not bodies. But
Yeah, right.
just a
But
bad joke.
we've
Sorry.
just learned something else. We've just learned something else, but is that the humans should always be able to override the guest. So Amir started speaking and he interrupted. This guest here interrupted, and that shouldn't be allowed. So it's just another thing we learned today. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Amir.
Anyway,
Carry
if to
on.
go back, no, that was a wonderful point. And actually, I think it's very important, your points, not just to let the AI rule everything and have some insights like where we are having this discussion, or to have a more human-like, like a sense of humor and things like this in the conversation. If to go back to the question of hearing impairment, it's a question that is very close to my heart because of the research we are doing, but also because there is, people think, oh, it's just hearing impairment, for example, or just seeing impairment. But actually, it's much deeper issues. For example, just to give you some stats on this, there is a so every 5 years we are losing more and more hair cells and their structure, and more and more people are hearing impaired. So that's one point. Second point, which is very interesting, there is very big correlation between hearing impairments and developing dementia. And the key point here is not necessarily the losing of the hearing itself, but when people are, imagine, for example, you're in a restaurant. Yeah, you can be in a VR setting in a restaurant or in a real restaurant. There is a lot of noises, and people that are hearing impaired with age or from different reasons would ask again, what did you say? Ask again, what did you say? And then it will feel uncomfortable for them to ask. So what would they do? They would stop going to the restaurant, and they would interact less socially, or they would go inside the VR less. And this would expedite the brain degeneration and the dementia. So dealing with this issue is very important to the general health of the population and individuals, their social, their emotional. It's not just a question of hearing better or not. And I also gave this example of the restaurant, and in some scenarios, when we are having more than 2 channels, like the cocktail party effect, we are all becoming hearing impaired. So it's a very deep question. So this is why we took it very seriously in the guest. And I think on the lab level, we kind of solved a lot of these problems in a way that is very impressive. For example, just to give you some papers that are part of the guest, we showed that you can double the signal to noise of speech perception in noisy environment, both for regular people and in a noisy environment, or for hearing impaired. And their performance improved. Now it's a question of how we embed them in the VR headsets and in the controllers. Yeah. And we also found some very fascinating changes. So seeing, for example, that the auditory cortex is being taken over or being responsive more to touch once they learn to integrate haptics and audition.
Yeah. Can I
Okay,
add something here in the line of like what Mel and Amir said? One of the actions that we took also was there was a demo in IEEE VR, which was we had, I think, many papers over there too. One action that we took was actually demoing how hearing loss feels to the normal hearing users, and also then the use of hearing aid. And this was something similar to this like body swapping. So you can actually swap like hearing with someone having hearing loss. And then also hear how the hearing aid, because when people think about hearing aid, they just think that it just solves everything. But it is, I mean, a quite different listening experience. So there we had some people saying us like they could have never imagined like how hearing loss felt and also what hearing aid does. So there was this kind of like empathy, like social layer also like raising awareness to how like hearing loss feels on top of also the things that we did like trying to solve the problems of like VR with like inclusion of hearing loss people. So I think that was a quite a nice action in that sense that combined both like the hearing loss issue and also this like swapping not bodies but in this time like ears to show people how it feels like from a different perspective.
Yeah. So interesting.
Can I say something?
This has been a
So,
fascinating debate, but in the interest of
okay.
time, let's
So
move
I
on to
want.
questions.
You're a bit rude, Albert, but yeah, sure. Whatever.
Questions. So how will the audience ask questions?
I don't know, Mel. The guest is really pushing me to share my ideas. It keeps whispering in my
Yeah.
ear that I should
Yeah.
intervene.
I'm going to see if there is questions.
So it seems,
I was
Okay.
gonna
it seems
say
that
Yeah.
our
that
two
this is a
layers of
perfect.
AI seem to be in some sort of conflict here.
Yeah.
Albert wants to
Yeah.
move to
This is
questions, and the other
a.
one wants me to intervene.
Are there any
No,
questions?
this is the.
Here, one question.
Oh,
When everybody is looking at one speaker, is it a control of the FOV of everybody or a outside incentive to look at somebody that people could follow or something that only the next speaker sees?
Everybody sees that all the avatars are looking at a particular person, irrespective of what the real people are doing. So the real people can be looking anywhere, but the avatars are all turned, the heads are turned to look at a particular person. So we've realized during the course of last week and this week, this is very, very strong. And actually, we have to really control how this and some of the other actions happen. So this has been a very good learning experience. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
Maybe you can
the
add a
fact
little
that
bit of
yeah.
noise to this,
Yeah.
and then it will be like 80% looking or something.
Yeah.
I want
For
to
instance,
comment on this
everybody's
because I
looking
think
at
we
me
have a
now.
perfect example of the problem of AI alignment, which is that we give it like instructions to encourage people who are silent to speak, and the guest is gaming the system, basically doing more and more actions. So it's not aligned with what we're expecting it to do. It's kind of interrupting too much. In
It's a
previous
kind of
sessions of the
over-alignment,
guest,
in
we had the
fact, right?
guest keep approaching people and telling them like, "What do you think about this, Anatole? What do you think about this, Darian?" And so in the simulation, when we notice this, we basically have to adjust the objective function. And we say, well, your goal is to support some pro-social metric, but you also have another goal, which is not to intervene too much, for example. And this can give you a sense of why this AI challenge is really interesting. Sorry
Yeah.
for
In
this.
fact,
I'm sorry,
On the
Albert,
other
for
hand,
taking
one
my
of the
turn.
modalities, which is that
Very interesting.
that we
That one.
yeah, maybe I can add something here also. It's just a pure experience that I'm feeling today, and that I realize also today. It's the power of this agent Albert today, because although he's doing a lot of social interactions with us, we are actually very well respecting, more or less consciously, him as the moderator of the meeting, and it's working
Yeah.
very well.
That's
Although there are
true.
many mistakes today.
That's a good
I was going
point.
to say
Yeah.
the opposite.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
really?
was going to say that
I
the
see that
opposite.
also.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get a whisper, even though there are people are not looking at me, even though like I
Because
didn't
it's a different
actually.
action. There's several
Yeah,
different actions.
exactly.
It's not they look at you and you get the whisper. You get the whisper or they
Yeah,
look at you. Yeah.
that's nice. At
Yeah.
least,
Yeah.
like I mean,
But I think the functionality of the looking and the fact that we can all see the avatars looking at a specific person does more than just to alert the one person that they should speak, but alerts the rest of us as well that maybe that person
Yeah.
hasn't had
yeah,
equitable speaking time.
that's true.
So I think in that
Mm.
sense, it's something that wouldn't happen probably in a normal meeting. We wouldn't all behave like that, just start staring at somebody, right? We try to be much more subtle. But that lack of subtlety in fact does alert us to something that's important that we might otherwise miss in a normal meeting setting. So I mean, there is a question of a little bit how we play with this alignment, right? Sometimes the over alignment or the exaggeration, which we might find in a VR setting, can be helpful and can be leveraged in a positive way. Other times
Yeah.
it might be distracting, or it might in fact be even kind of detracting from the pro-socialness of the situation.
But you know, if I may add here, you know, it's actually an example of how sometimes people ask, so why in VR, right? We can have the same AI control in regular Zoom and so on. And I think it's a very powerful, yes, we have a lot to learn and to fine tune and so on and so forth, but it's the first time I'm under this context. And I think it's a very powerful example of how the VR doing something that in real reality we cannot control the gaze of other people and things like this. And there is a lot of and the discussion is very pleasant. I have some criticism, you know, of there is some pros, some cons, and so on. But it's show how the VR context can be very powerful to the brain and to the in this social context to do something that a regular meeting cannot do.
Like this,
Yeah.
we're in each other's proximal space. We can do a high five that you can't really do on Zoom.
Yeah.
Just a second, I will try.
Yeah, there we go.
That's
Yeah,
great.
this
I
we
love
already
it.
tried, I think. Like this is something. Yeah. Oh,
That's where we need the haptics as well. Yeah. Any
yeah.
other
Yeah,
And I actually
questions?
have to
Yeah.
add, like, this is a
Yeah, I've been
new
beating up
social
Amir for a
environment,
few seconds, but he doesn't
so
feel
it
it.
has its own rules.
Another question. Did you consider during this project that AI should intervene as few as
Sorry.
possible
funny.
to let humans
Yeah,
the
that's funny.
maximum social space? I can see that AI intervenes during this panel, much less than during the virtual IEE VAR panel.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in the IEEE panel, there was no AI. Apart from Turing, sorry, there was a Turing there, but he was playing a very different role. He was another participant. He wasn't controlling the meeting or giving us feedback.
I think, Mel, there's two types of AI here. There's the LLM and then there's
Yes,
the moderation of actions. So maybe in the IEEE VR, you did have the AI speaking.
yes,
And
but
here
not.
Einstein is
Yeah.
not speaking a lot, but it's always doing something to nudge us.
But I think it comes back a lot to what Amir just said also a moment ago. It's not just a question of, the degree to which the AI intervenes, how little or how much, but it's a question of how the AI is intervening, and also how we are using the different types of interventions that might occur or might not occur, in fact, in a physical setting, and what are we using those towards. So that should be taken into account, along with what Mel said earlier, that there should always be the possibility for the human to overrule the AI in this setting, right? We should always be able to say, okay, Albert, that's enough now. Or if somebody is in fact feeling
Yeah.
very
Oh,
uncomfortable by being, go ahead, Amir, sorry.
no. I totally agree with you. Or it can be also that, for example, Mel, as the coordinator and the leader of this project, can have like a bigger weight to overrule the AI, and not everyone can rule the discussion and take over or thing like this. So, just like an example.
Okay, everyone's looking at me again.
If you were to begin this project again with the benefit of your knowledge today, what would you do differently?
I think we start with Doron on that. Yeah.
Hmm? Well, I don't know. It's Friday, and I'm getting a lot of WhatsApp personal message about people getting ready for a family dinner. So I've been a bit distracted. But
What
I
would you
think
do
the
differently if we started
challenges,
again?
the challenges we have. No, I'm saying it's a very interesting experience. But anyway, the challenges we have is that AI is moving very, very fast, and especially moved a lot. We wrote the proposal a few years before we got the project. At that time, deep reinforcement learning was the most promising technology. LLMs just started kind of coming, to the main stage. And so we've done a little bit of everything during the project. But I think, if we should do it again now, we can do exactly the same thing. Only the AI is going about 10,000 times better than when we started. So I don't think I think one more comment. Sorry, I know everybody's looking at Anatol. One more comment. I think interestingly, we had a lot of ideas that actually came to the front of AI. For those who've been following, there's things like the era of experience, or the second half. These are kind of semi-blogs, not really papers, by AI leaders saying that now we're in the age of AI need to learn from simulations and the need of continuous learning from real data, etc. A lot of ideas that we kind of put in the guest 6 years ago are now coming to the front. So that's also very interesting from an AI point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would for because everybody's looking at me, so I feel indeed like I have to say something. But actually, when I was hearing Doron, I was thinking a bit the same. So I would not really do something differently. I had the impression that we had to pass all these steps all together in this project to realize progressively all the complexity of the field and all the challenges that we have in front of us. And now what we are all regretting is that the project is stopping at the moment when the technology is not ready yet, and we have lots of ideas to improve it and lots of new experiments and user study we would like to do all together. So that's I think it's more frustration of what we all have in front of us as ideas to continue this project more than what we would do differently.
Yeah, we have to apply for more funding again. Yeah. So
maybe to add something very quick to this, I think that's my only perspective as a non-expert in this. But I think when we started, we knew how AI is going to be central to this project, but I think we didn't realize how central and how quickly it's going to move on and how powerful. So I think in the next project we need 3 Dorons in the
Actually,
project.
Amir, you are absolutely right. We were aware of it. I tried to convince our reinforcement learning experts to join the consortium, and most of the good RL people were afraid to join the consortium. They said that the problem is too complicated. So we were aware that we needed a lot more resources, but it's kind of a fuzzy problem for us. It's fascinating for a lot of AI engineers. You know, they prefer the well-defined thing. So yeah, that's a challenge also.
Yeah,
but maybe it's also another thing that changed in these years.
I'm not sure. We still, I mean, AI people still prefer well-defined problems where, you know, the VR is kind of a, you know, it's become so competitive, the research. And my students are asking, like, why do we need this VR integration? You know, anyway, we have to write papers and compete with, I think Nurip said like 24,000 papers. So, you know, how can we spend so much time on these real problems when everybody's doing math? Anyway, it's yeah, very, very exciting things going on, but I think also lots of opportunities.
So maybe the guest, is there one last question and then we can finish today?
That's all. There are no more questions.
Okay, if you've got any last question to us, maybe we should also just say 1 or 2 words to finish off, and then we finish. So let's start with Anatol.
Wait, I'll take a video.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think well, overall it's more like a conclusion on this project, which has been a great journey for us. We discovered, I mean, in the frame of the project, so many new things, as we said before, and I think we had to reconfigure ourselves a lot. But in the end, we are discovering that this field is just at the beginning of something. But yeah, I guess many more interesting research is in front of us.
Umut, yeah.
I would like to say something addition to what just Doron said. I think we all know by now that like AI is doing a lot in the society. Also, VR has been quite big for many years now, but like the combination of these two is actually gives us a really, really powerful tool for like education, training, and also communicating things like empathy, for example, that you wouldn't be able to do in real life, or it will be complex like experiments. So there is like a really powerful tool in our hands, and I would really like people to do research on this, then just like some incremental like changes in some papers that you just got like, I don't know, like 2 dBs more improvement, etc. Just to like go in this direction and just like make use of the tool and the things that we have developed here.
Yeah, my last word is now that we finish the project, I think we know how to start it. So it's like other people have said, we've learnt so much, and now we start the project again, and it would be on a different level. I'd also like to thank Ramon, who's looking like a robot over there, who's been controlling everything behind the scenes.